Hi, this is Dr. Michael Finkelstein. I'm also known as the Slow Medicine Doctor, and I'm here in Bedford, New York at Sunraven, the home of slow medicine, with my partner, Robin Queen Finkelstein, also known as the Slow Medicine Therapist, and she also happens to be my wife. And we're a couple, and we work together and live together, and what we're now going to share with you after our initial show last week, we got a little bit of a taste of how we talk about life together and the subject of independence. We're going to speak to you today and next week as well about the communication between couples, about how difficult that is at times, but how important it is for people who do desire to have amazing relationships, particularly with their closest partner, to be able to get past some of the habits and the pitfalls of those habits where we seem to just get trapped in vicious cycles. Frankly, I've learned a lot of this from Robin, and so I expect that she'll be doing a lot of the speaking today, but I did want to introduce this because I want to share with you how much I've learned and inspire you to stay with us and listen. I think for the most part, when I see my patients, I actually call them clients, when they come to our farm here to ask me about how they can become healthier, and I show them the property and the garden and the animals, it all comes back to our relationships. The reason we want to be healthy is so that we can have great relationships, that when we're healthy in our body, when we're healthy in our mind, when we're healthy in our spirit, we actually present ourselves as a much more appealing partner to anybody. So this is part of our work and our life together, and we want to share with you how this can affect you in such a way that you can achieve the quality of life, the quality of relationships that you desire. So with that, let me turn it to Robin, who might share some of her own initial thoughts on the subject of communication in healthy couples.
Thank you, Michael. It's lovely to be doing this with you because I am extremely passionate about relationships and how important it is for us. I was listening to you carefully about how important it is for us to connect with each other because we are interconnected human beings, and I also am very aware of you use the word reflecting, and reflection is absolutely necessary for us as human beings to be able to be heard, and how we do that is through communication, and which brings us to relationships.
Now, I'm going to add right away, as I'm looking at you, you're beautiful, and I'm always sort of happy to be in places like this where we are actually trying to share ourselves truly from what we know as professionals, but also how we are just other human beings on the planet, just like everyone else. And the fact is that we're a couple, and there are times when we don't always see exactly the same thing, but we're, part of our focus since the first day we met was really to learn and grow with each other. And part of that is that reflection piece, which is really to not necessarily just always reflect what we see or hear in the other person, but how we feel in response to that we see ourselves in part of this.
That's right. As animals, any living thing needs to partner or be connected in some other form, whether it's the garden that needs the rich soil and the sunlight, and or the water that helps that particular organism grow. It's very true for us, and I love that you shared about our commitment, our attraction to each other was simply a commitment to practice and learn how to grow. And most people are, I'm going to just say it, are in survival mode and don't really have the consciousness and the awareness and the tools how to commune with not only themselves, yet efficiently with another person. And because we have the commitment together, even though we do practice and sometimes it is challenging, we're both committed. And that's all I would like everyone to know, the most important thing is that you're just committed and you're aware and willing to learn how to really listen to your own inner communication.
Do you think when people get married or when they're, whether it's a formal marriage ceremony or not, there are vows taken, often when people use that word commitment to each other, that they necessarily understand what they're committing to?
No. So most of us are projecting about future or something from the past about relationships, whether it's the fairy tale, Cinderella, or many of the messages perhaps just from culture. However, they really are not aware that they are projecting outside to the other person to meet their needs. And yet that's a little complicated. We'll get into it a little bit more. They're just unconscious that what their amygdala, their brain is thinking, oh, this lovely person is going to complete me.
Yeah, so that's, I could say honestly, that's happened to me in previous relationships, even in ours. There is that hope, not necessarily an expectation, but there's really the hope that when I'm not feeling so well, in one way or another, not physically usually, but usually on an emotional level, when I feel lonely or isolated or uncared for, that somehow you're going to come in and then there's going to be a resolution immediately. And that's a lot of pressure, I guess, I place on you when that happens. And having had that experience before in relationships that didn't work indefinitely, then, you realize, or at least I do, that some of those relationships that didn't survive that was because I never really was able to fully, clearly express what those needs were and to ask in a way, or share them in a way, it wasn't really an ask and a request for that to be solved, but just to express myself and express the vulnerability, express the woundedness, express something inside. What I learned was that when I do that, when you ask me to do that, when you help me do that, it's in the expression that I find relief.
That's right. The vulnerability is exactly what prevents people from asking clearly about what it is that they need. And most of us in our culture have not had the mirroring of, I'm going to give you an example right now, of early on from our childhood, we're perhaps, okay.
No, my thought is that you would give an example of somebody without names that you've actually seen. So tell me a story of somebody that, in your work. What comes up? Give the specific details. That's what I'm thinking, because...
I'm curious. Tell me more of the question that you're asking.
Here's my need right now. So my need right now is to think about really trying to have the maximum, or at least a reasonable impact for those people who are listening. And I think storytelling is a really good way of sharing information, which is a little different than a didactic presentation. So my need is to be well received by the audience right now. I'd love very much for this to go over really well. That people really say, this is something unique. These people are sharing something, and it's not just telling me information, but it's like leading me by example or by sharing inspiring stories. So I know, Robin, you have, because of your work, the number of people you've seen, though it may take a moment for you to figure out who it is that you might share, without obviously the details, so that any individuals are mentioned by name for sure, but the story.
Okay. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is something very present in our business meeting this morning about our dog, our beautiful dog, Labradoodle. Oakley is his name. And Oakley has been acting out the past couple of weeks. So in our business meeting this morning, we were all discussing, and I was listening to you. You were concerned about what's going on, and what I heard you say is how are we going to fix this? What can the team do to fix the situation? And I'm not sure if you remember, I asked you, I'm curious what you think the dog might be needing that he's acting out. So it's an animal. However, there's still my curiosity about what do we think the dog needs. Typical, everyone had different ideas of what they could do, and I'm going to use that as my example.
Okay. So you're seeing couples here at Sunraven. What's the most common, or not the most common, but what's a common scenario? Why do people come to a couples counselor?
Okay. So they come in, most of the time, I'm going to be honest, because they would like to fix or change their other counterpart, which is their partners.
So give me an example. So what does the husband do that the wife thinks needs to be fixed?
Well, there's many different things. Habits, you mentioned earlier about habits. And so habits would be my husband works late and doesn't communicate with me about when he might be coming home. That would be, I'll just use that as an example.
So does that bring people to a couples counselor because husbands don't call and let their partner know when they're coming home?
Not actually. Underneath, we'll get to the good stuff. Underneath is the way that the person is communicating that particular, we're going to call it a complaint. However, underneath there is a need. Most people are not, when my couples come in, I'll ask them, what do you think it is that you might need? And they're not really sure. However, they are aware because they are evaluating.
So who
their
has
partners.
the need there? Is it the wife wants to be seen and cared for and number one?
There you go. You got it.
So, and when she's not feeling that, and her husband then complies in a way by breaching that connection and that commitment, by not calling, by being insensitive, let's say, to that need,
right,
then that creates a trigger. Now, if that happens chronically, often, not just once in a while, but really keeps happening, then there's something going on that's disturbing.
Yes. Well, it will. Both parties will be reflect or respond to that they're not getting their needs met.
So how
on both ends?
So we say, okay, so the woman, and I want to be careful that we're not like roles could be reversed,
yes,
and
absolutely.
this is not gender based even, but somebody's home, waiting for somebody else to arrive home,
Right.
and there is a gap of time and space, and an unclear, like, when is this person going to arrive? And the person who's home waiting is wondering if they are actually cared about. And that's old, perhaps, for that person, because maybe their parents or somebody didn't care about them, and this is like just old stuff, and their mate is now doing something that feels familiar and similar. But what's the person who's out on the road, who's not home, you think, in your experience, thinking, why aren't they calling?
I believe.
What's the need that they have, in other words?
Most likely because they don't feel secure in the communication. So what that might look like, they may feel judged or evaluated, that they're doing something wrong. So
They don't even go there.
they don't go there. So then we know what happens. There's a disconnect in the relationship, and on both parties. So what I help couples understand is what actually is the need when we are frustrated. So most of the time they come to me when they're frustrated or they're angry that this other person is not seeing them and taking care of their needs. So how important is it for us to realize, I would ask the spouse, the woman, what is it actually that she needs? And the vulnerability that you shared about before it could be terrifying. It actually could be terrifying for a person to ask for something. Now we connect back to history and childhood. If children are just so naturally, in the moment, and they ask for everything that they need, if it's not acceptable by society or the parents, where does that go?
So the person home has experienced when they were very young asking for what they needed and being shut down by somebody or dismissed or inattended to, and as a result learned that it was not safe to express their needs. And so in their adult relationship now, they tend not to express those needs clearly because they have had this wound created. Now on the other side of it, so I keep wanting to go to, because I'm actually identifying more with the guy on the road who doesn't call. So I'm asking for your help. Okay. So what is the story there? What do you think the story there is?
Well, I think it's back to them not feeling safe and secure from their own imago. Imago is actually the imprints from childhood, which we were just referring to. What's going on for that particular person is most likely a survival mechanism that they are just familiar with, which is I'm going to pull away. It's easier to spend more time at work than to come home and be in a relationship with someone who doesn't know how to express what the true need is in a positive.
Yeah. So you're saying it's sort of like an avoidance.
Avoidance, perhaps.
Of conflict or a. So that's interesting. So you think that happens often?
Very much so, yes.
Yeah.
I see it often. Again, back to what my hopes are for our show is to help educate. As I practice myself, this is my passion, is to understand, to learn how to communicate in a way that is effective, that creates closeness with our partner, opposed to, I need to move back away, as you say.
Yeah. So when that couple comes in, and this is probably not the only thing that's going on, right? This probably is maybe the most common example. Maybe it's the final straw. Maybe it's something that's really upsetting. But in general, is that enough for a couple to really feel the tension and be breaking apart? Or do you think there are other elements?
Oh, I'm absolutely sure there are other elements as well. However, this ongoing state within of frustration, of not believing that we're going to get our needs met.
Pretty dominant.
Pretty dominant, and it builds, and then one would say, what am I doing here? Some think, I'll find something better outside myself. However, what it is that they need is really about learning how to commune with themselves, to be in touch with exactly what it is that they would like from the partner. Many people are not that clear.
Right.
It's we live in a state of vagueness, very much related to our childhood.
So I have another question. So when you see couples, and I don't know this from my experience, when I see couples, and I don't see as many couples, certainly not in the context that you do. I see them when they're thinking about how they can have a healthy home and what goes on as far as, let's say, choices in the house, like, say, food or questions about medical diagnoses. So I see families, I see couples, and I have an observation, but I don't really dwell, as you do, week after week in the dynamics between two individuals as the relationship is the focal point for at least the work that you do. So the question I have is but my sense is that there's value in seeing the couple together, but there's also an importance for each individual in the couple to look at themselves, and to the degree that some of what's going on is their own business, meaning their own internal processing, the wounds they've experienced for sure, and how they could maybe recover some balance from having experienced those, but also their physical health, their emotional health, spiritual health, not just 100% about the couple, even though the couple may be where it really comes to the surface in the most volatile way, in the most obvious way, and since it involves in others so intimately, it's where it's quite important, because if we project our wounds, as you were saying earlier, onto other people, it could create more of a mess. But don't you think that there is both value of couples coming together and having a therapist in the room with them, but then also for them to do individual work?
Absolutely necessary for the relationship to grow. There's 3 relationships happening. There's each individual, and then there's a third entity. And to get to work on that third entity, we need to have the individual relationship with self at least clear and open-minded to self-exploration for this relationship to transcend the couple.
So I think that's really brilliant. I know that you came up with that a couple of years ago when we were talking about our work together and our programs, but there's this third subject in the room when it's a couple, and it's the couplehood. It's how each person invests into the couple. So there are those 2 individuals, and then the third party, which in a committed relationship is the devotional aspect, and that each person brings to that. So I think this is good. I think we're in a good place. I'd like to just invite people who have listened to us today to think about this and how it applies in their own life, and enjoy this show, which will be back next week. And I have a thought, Robin, tell me if you think it's a good one, about subjects for next week. But one of the most important subjects that comes up, it's often not discussed because it's so sensitive, that has a lot to do with needs, is our relationships, both as individuals and then as a couple, in this way, to 2 subjects in particular. One is finances, money, and the other is sex. And so I'd like to maybe talk about those 2 next week. How's that sound to you?
Oh, it sounds extremely important.
Okay. Sounds good. So anyway, I really love talking to you. I love looking at you across the table while we do this. And next week when we come back, we'll share more.
Yes. Thank you, Michael.
So this is Slow Medicine for Couples, and we're at Sunraven in Bedford. And the website, if you're interested in our work, is slowmedicine.org. slowmedicine.org, and Robin is the Slow Medicine Therapist, and you can email her at robin@slowmedicinetherapist.com, and I'm Michael Finkelstein, the Slow Medicine Doctor, and my email is michael@slowmedicinedoctor.com. We'd love to hear from you, but if not, you're going to hear from us next week. Take care.
Dum